First question, how is Amber doing? We saw her hearing that verdict. It took a long time to read. It was a sweeping verdict for Johnny Depp. How did she handle it?
You know, one of the first things she said is, I am so sorry to all those women out there.
Che brava. Ma che magnanima questa Amber. La prima cosa che ha detto. Povere tutte quelle donne che la detestano e la vogliono morta. Poverine queste donne che si vergognano di condividere una figa proprio come lei. Povere donne, poverine.
Xyonao.
Fearless and human. Sauvage, the new elixir. Dio.
Non farmi male, Amber. Aiuto. Aiuto, Amber. Non farmi male. Quella è una bottiglia, Amber. Non tirarmi la bottiglia, non la bottiglia! Questa è una battuta su quello che ha vissuto Johnny.
For all women in and outside the courtroom, and she feels the burden of that.
Well, knowing the case and knowing the law, as you certainly do, frankly, it favors the defendants like Amber Heard. Are you stunned that the jury essentially rejected her story?
Well, you know, really what happened here is it's a tale of two trials. Johnny Depp brought a suit in the UK for the same case, and the burden of proof was easier for him there. The son had to actually prove that it was true, and the court found there, and we weren't allowed to tell the jury this, but the court found that Mr. Depp had committed at least 12 acts of domestic violence, including sexual violence, against Amber. Did Depp's team learn from this? Demonize Amber and suppress the evidence. We had an enormous amount of evidence that was suppressed in this case that was in the UK case. In the UK case, when it came in, Amber won, Mr. Depp lost.
Ma la UK case comunque hanno mostrato le stesse prove, io l'ho visto. Hanno mostrato le stesse prove. Cosa non hanno fatto vedere? No, perché mi interessa.
Here's the thing, you were able to get some evidence that you say demonstrated abuse. You certainly had her testimony. There were pictures, documents, all kinds of. The jury rejected it. You argued in your closing arguments that if they found even one instance of abuse, and it did not even have to be physical abuse, that they would have to find for Amber Heard, and they didn't.
And the other part to bear in mind here is nothing changed. The op-ed didn't even mention Mr. Depp by name. And so what basically they did here is demonize her. They were able to suppress the medical records, which were very, very significant because they showed a pattern going all the way back to 2012 of Amber reporting this to her therapist, for example. We had significant amount of texts, including from Mr. Depp's assistants, saying, when I told him he kicked you, he cried. He is so sorry. That didn't come in.
Is there any other way to interpret this verdict, though, that this jury, for whatever reason, and I hear you on some of the evidence that they didn't hear, listening to Amber Heard, did not believe a single word?
You know, and that's because she was demonized here. A number of things were allowed in this court that should not have been allowed.
Ma il fatto è questo, che vuol dire demonizzare Amber? Era un po' la missione del team di Depp, perché non solo bisogna far vedere che Depp non era tutto questo abusatore, ma che in realtà lo fosse lei, ma per arrivare alla roba della diffamazione, perché per lei è stato veramente un gioco e c'è riuscita a fare questo gioco proprio perché abusava e lui si è dovuto stare zitto. Non a caso la famosa frase "e chi dovrebbe crederti?". Non capisco questa cosa veramente.
It caused the jury to be confused. We weren't allowed to tell them about the UK judgment. So the damages is completely skewed. There are no damages. It stopped at November 2, 2020, which is when the judgment came down in the UK.
Let me ask you about social media in this case.
Let me ask you about social media in this case. Parliamo di quello, parliamo di quello. E dici sì!
Unlike any celebrity case, certainly I've ever covered or ever seen.
Scusatemi ragazzi, sono stato esagerato in quello che ho fatto e che a volte
Social media was a part of this, and it was incredibly lopsided and vitriolic against Amber Heard. Do you think that had an effect on the case?
Absolutely.
You think jurors were aware of it? They weren't supposed to be. They're admonished every single day. Don't look at it. Do you think they did see it?
How can you not? They went home every night. They have families. The families are on social media. We had a 10-day break in the middle because of the judicial conference. There's no way they couldn't have been influenced by it. And it was horrible. It really, really was lopsided. And I appreciate your saying that. It's like the Roman Colosseum, you know, how they viewed this whole case.
Quindi anche se non avevano possibilità di guardare internet durante il processo, comunque tornavano a casa alle loro famiglie. Queste qua avevano i social media e quindi la giuria veniva influenzata. Io sono un po' un ignorantone, ma come viene scelta la giuria in America? Io penso questo. Se sei parte del gruppo che decide il destino di queste persone, finanziario, di carriera, di dignità, di tutto, un po' lo noti che internet non sa prendere le palle al balzo e esagera sempre, perciò non te ne fai un peso. Ci riesco io e su internet lavoro, dico solo questo, secondo me appellarsi a questa roba qua è solamente l'unica cosa che può fare l'avvocatessa, perché se no che cazzo altro può dire? Mi sembra veramente un'ultima spiaggia e anche poco intelligente da dire. Che ne pensate? Sta facendo la vittima, praticamente prendono la gente per strada e dicono oh, vogliono giudicare Amber e Depp, dai. Sì, ma non prendiamo la giuria come nel PC che non capiscono un cazzo, devi essere competente. Io ho visto più di un film recentemente dove si dice che viene scelta da un esperto. Dicono che prima del weekend erano tutti tranne due dalla parte di Amber e il martedì avevano cambiato idea tutti tranne uno. Mi ricordo le notizie iniziali che erano molto pro Amber, le ricordo, certo.
I was against cameras in the courtroom, and I went on record with that and had argued against it because of the sensitive nature of this. But it made it a zoo.
Does your client want to?
Ha ragione. Ha ragionissimo. Ha ragionissimo. All'inizio io parlai del fatto che cioè dal punto di vista mio meglio che l'hanno fatta in TV perché ci abbiamo fatto del content, però non vale un cazzo, sono veramente un piccolo buco di culo. Come lo sono tutti quelli che ci hanno mangiato su. Quello che c'è di importante è che effettivamente, cioè una volta che sei consapevole che tutto viene fatto vedere, comunque un po' più che influenza la giuria, influenza chi c'è dentro, avvocati, eccetera. E un po' ho cambiato idea sul è servito a qualcosa o no farlo televisionare sta roba qua, perché non è niente di che il processo. Anch'io all'inizio ero dell'idea, ma anche i maschi possono essere abusati, però sono due cretini tutti e due, sono due tossici tutti e due, sia letteralmente che metaforicamente. Un po' quest'idea è cambiata, perciò qua le do totalmente ragione, ero un cazzo di zoo, era veramente a chi imbrogliava meglio, a chi diceva la cazzata più grossa, a chi usciva la prova più assurda o la meno assurda parlandone in maniera più assurda.
Appeal.
Oh, absolutely. And she has some excellent grounds too.
Does your client want to appeal?
Oh, absolutely.
Se vuole mandare un appeal.
And she has some excellent grounds for it. We even had tried to get the UK judgment in to dismiss his case because he already had his shot. And that's one of the issues, but also a number of the evidentiary issues. There was so much evidence that did not come in.
Is she able to pay a $10.4 million judgment?
Oh, no, absolutely not.
Finally, in closing arguments,
Alexa, quanto sono 10 milioni di dollari in euro?
10 milioni di dollari sono pari a 9.345.800 euro.
Sono tanti.
Amber's team argued that this would send a message, that it would send a message that no matter what you do as an abuse victim, you always have to do more. You need to be perfect in order for people to believe you if she did not get a favorable verdict. What message do you think this sends?
It's a horrible message. It's
Finally, in closing arguments, Amber's team argued that this would send a message, that it would send a message that no matter what you do as an abuse victim, you always have to do more. You need to be perfect in order for people to believe you.
Questo è il messaggio che il team di Amber vuole mandare?
If she did not get a favorable verdict. What message do you think this sends?
It's a horrible message. It's, as I said, a setback. It's a significant setback because that's exactly what it means. Unless you pull out your phone and you video your spouse or your significant other beating you, effectively, you won't be believed.
Elaine Charles and Bretta Hoff, thank you very much for your
Ma l'ha fatto. Ma l'ha fatto un sacco di volte Amber.
time this morning.
Volevo farvi vedere questo che era molto interessante, raga.
We have a verdict in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case, and like everything in the trial itself, it's controversial. The jury ruled in favor of Johnny Depp in his libel suit against Amber Heard. Depp sued his former wife for
Questo tizio qua è un avvocato, legal eagle. Ah sì, analizza le cose da un punto di vista legale.
writing about being a domestic abuse victim because he said he never abused her. The jury awarded Depp $15 million in damages, $10 million in compensatory damages, and $5 million in punitive damages. The jury also ruled in favor of Amber Heard on one of her counterclaims against Depp. She alleged that Depp directed a smear campaign against her, having his ex-lawyer saying she fabricated the evidence of her
Agnese innocente.
abuse. The jury awarded her $2 million in compensatory damages and nothing in punitives. So at the end of the day, they both win. Hooray! No, but seriously, how can they both have defamed each other?
Sei bellissimo.
Let's dig into this verdict. Now, first of all, and I hate that I have to say this, no one is going to jail. This is a civil case, and no one is guilty. People are liable in a civil case.
Infatti molti dicevano che era penale, ma non è
They're
vero.
not guilty or not guilty, despite what some putative law professor has said.
Già.
Civil trial. There's no guilt involved. Now, in fairness, about half the states do have a criminal defamation
Non ci sono colpevoli in questo caso.
statute, including Virginia, but this is not one of those cases. It's just two people suing each other. The state is not involved. But as you probably know, here we have two public figures suing each other for defamation, and when you have celebrities, you generally have a higher standard of proof to make your claim. The law makes it difficult for public people to win a defamation suit, even if a published story contains inaccuracies. In order for a public figure to win, the jury has to find that the defendant made statements about them with actual malice. Actual malice means knowledge of the falsity, or at a minimum, a reckless disregard for the truth of the statement.
Quindi per reputare qualcosa di diffamante, quando hanno detto actual malice, infatti hanno detto se ha fatto gli statement diffamatori con actual malice, quindi che li faceva sapendo che erano falsi e che se ne fregava della verità.
That has nothing to do with animosity. Now, as you probably know, Amber Heard wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post that contained these sentences. Quote, "Then 2 years ago, I became a public figure representing domestic abuse, and I felt the full force of our culture's wrath for women who speak out. And, quote, I had the rare vantage point of seeing in real time how institutions protect men accused of abuse." Now, Johnny Depp challenged these sentences and also the headline written by the Washington Post itself. Quote, "Amber Heard, I spoke up about sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath. That has to change." Depp sued Heard, alleging these sentences were defamatory. And during closing arguments, Heard's lawyer told the jury that if they believed Depp abused her even one time, that he cannot prove defamation.
If Amber was abused by Mr. Depp even one time, then she wins.
Now, during deliberations, the jury had to evaluate the evidence that they heard over the 6-week trial and apply the jury instructions given to them by the judge. With Depp's defamation claims, they were looking at Instruction C, which you can see here. So the jury had to decide whether Heard made or republished any of these statements. These were false statements, whether they harmed his reputation, and whether Amber Heard acted with actual malice. They answered yes. Yes, she said or republished these words. Yes, they were false. And yes, they hurt his reputation. The jury likely decided everything that Amber Heard said about abuse was false and that she did it with reckless disregard for the truth. And as a result, Johnny Depp sustained about $15 million in damages, $10 million in compensatory damages, which is meant to compensate him for the damage that he actually suffered.
Però è per questo che qui ci sono pochissimi e ha palesemente perso molto di più. di 15 milioni.
as well as
Forse anche più di quanti ne ha chiesti lui.
$5 million in punitives, that is, to punish Amber Heard for her statements.
Ok. Quindi 10 milioni per quello che ha perso di carriera e 5 come punizione ad Amber.
Now, the judge cut the punitives down to $350,000, bringing the total to $10.35 million. Now, those are obviously large numbers, but it kind of makes sense in the context of Johnny Depp. About $15 million in damages, $10 million in compensatory damages, which is meant to compensate him for the damage that he actually suffered, as well as $5 million in punitives, that is, to punish Amber Heard for her statements. Now, the judge cut the punitives down to $350,000, bringing the total to $10.35
Sono stati ricalcolati, ok.
million. Now, those are obviously large numbers, but it kind of makes sense in the context of Johnny Depp. He is a famous movie star, and he alleges, probably truthfully, that these allegations have really hurt his career, and
6 era il film che non è uscito, giusto? Il suo agente prende il 10%. Non franchise film and other. Cioè di merch di merda fa più del film, assurdo. Booking 10.000, che sarebbero gli eventi. Pazzesco.
hurt his ability to make millions and millions of dollars. So it's entirely possible that he lost $10 million as a result of the statements that Amber Heard made against him. And given the general nature of Heard's statements, the fact that the jury found in Depp's favor probably means that the jury likely didn't believe any of Heard's substantive claims of abuse. Now, some have argued that Heard got a raw deal because her column did not mention Depp by name. But Depp successfully argued that it was an example of what's called defamation by implication because parts of the column referred to the allegations of abuse that she made against him following their breakup in 2016. And it's probably fair to say that the general public knew about Heard's connection to Depp,
Certo.
and that they would have assumed that the allegations made in the op-ed referred to Depp because of that.
Quindi anche se non aveva fatto nomi, il fatto che avesse usato gli stessi argomenti di quando si lasciò con lui nel 2016 è comunque diffamazione. Sta roba è assurdo, visto che molta gente se la tira dicendo non ho fatto nomi. No, non so come funziona qua in Italia, però sì, molti lo dicono, ma non ho fatto nomi.
That connection and that she was directing those statements at Johnny Depp. And there's plenty of law on this. This is not unusual for a defamation by implication case. And that takes us to Amber Heard's counterclaims. You'd think that if Heard defamed Depp, then they would dismiss Heard's claims and that
Marco Ciccione è pure brutto. Zitto Marco apri bocca solo per far uscire puzza di merda. Marco è una battona come sua madre. Marco Coglione torna dopo 6 mesi, è ancora incazzato ma vai in figa. Sei deficiente, non serve a un cazzo. Marco Fotti, zitto fanculo. Punto esclamativo Prime. Ce ne sbatte una ciolla di quando inizia l'horror. Ce ne sbatte una ciolla. Minchia, utente SOS2. Benvenuto. Benvenuto fra i manipolati.
would be the end of the story. But what fun would that be? As you know, the jury also found that Depp defamed Heard, but it looks like that relates to a statement only tangentially related to the main abuse statements. Now, after Depp sued Heard in 2021, she filed a counterclaim against him. She said that Depp directed his ex-lawyer, Adam Waldman, to make defamatory statements about her, including these three. Statement A, quote, Amber Heard and her friends in the media used fake sexual violence allegations as both a sword and a shield depending on their needs. They have selected some of her sexual violence hoax facts as a sword, inflicting them on the public and Mr. Depp. Statement B, quote, quite simply, this was an ambush, a hoax. They set Mr. Depp up by calling the cops, but the first step didn't do the trick. The officers came to the penthouses, thoroughly searched and interviewed, and left after seeing no damage to face or property. So Amber and her friends spilled a little wine and roughed up the place, got their stories straight under the direction of a lawyer and publicist, and then placed a second call to 911. Statement C, quote, we have reached the beginning of the end of Miss Heard's abuse hoax against Mr. Depp. And the jury reviewed the evidence and, with respect to at least one of these statements, believed that that was the case. Specifically, they decided that Statement B, the long paragraph about a specific incident, was false. The main facts about that incident were relayed to the jury by Heard and her friends, the very same people that the jury found had completely made up things in order to hurt Depp. Now, we'll need to hear from the jury to understand exactly what they were thinking, but we can presume that the jury reviewed the evidence and concluded that Amber Heard and her friends didn't orchestrate an abuse hoax on that occasion. Maybe they didn't spill wine or rough up the place. They didn't work with a lawyer or publicist. They might not have gotten their stories straight. If this is what the jury meant, then they could be claiming that the underlying incident is still based on a lie, but that Heard orchestrated the lie in a different way, or that she was lying about other things and not this thing. But at the end of the day, the jury awarded $2 million to Heard for this particular falsity.
Ok, perché Johnny disse che quando lei chiamò il 911 per farla andare a casa, probabilmente era stato tutto una macchinazione, avevano rotto un po' il posto, buttato il vino per terra e che tutto era un piano e l'hanno presa come diffamazione perché in realtà la giuria ha deciso che non era vero, che probabilmente era effettivamente successo, che comunque non è stata una macchinazione. E per questo ho dovuto pagare 2 milioni Johnny ad Amber.
These same jurors probably found that she acted with actual malice in concocting a hoax that included
Quella giovane era più brutta, ma io ora lei. Non penso. Cioè non per me.
fake bruises and
C'è capito?
fake tears and fake claims, and thus statements A and C were therefore not defamatory, only statement B, which referred to a very specific tangential incident. So both Depp and Heard were awarded compensatory damages. These are things that are meant to compensate a plaintiff to be in the same position that they would be if they weren't injured. Things like financial losses, medical bills, lost income, and reduced earning potential. And a damage award can also consider non-monetary losses as well, like emotional pain or physical pain, loss of companionship. All of those would be considered compensatory damages. But Johnny Depp was awarded punitive damages as well, which are designed to warn others and punish this particular defendant. They are assessed when a jury wants to punish someone who acted totally outside the bounds of appropriate conduct. And they're only available in Virginia if the defendant has acted wantonly, oppressively, or with such malice as to evince a spirit of malice or criminal indifference to civil obligations. But in Virginia, punitive damages are capped at $350,000 by statute. Now, the jury found that Amber Heard had defamed Johnny Depp and that her conduct satisfied the very high standard for punitive damages. Now, they awarded him a lot of money, $5 million in punitive damages, but the judge reduced that damages award to $350,000 as required by statute. Now, the jury wouldn't have known that going into deliberations. That's to make sure that they don't shift all of the punitive damages into the compensatory damages award. But after the verdict was reached, the judge capped the amount that was required by law. Tangentially, you might also hear lawyers referring to the State Farm standard, where punitive damages are capped as a matter of constitutional law. That's a Supreme Court case. That doesn't apply here. There was a specific statute in Virginia that limited punitive damages to $350,000.
Va bene.
That doesn't really implicate the State Farm Supreme Court case. That being said, after the punitive damages were capped, Johnny Depp was entitled to $10.35 million. Though Amber Heard was awarded $2 million in compensatory damages related to the Statement B that we just talked about, netting Johnny Depp $8.35 million at the end of the day. So, what's next? Can Johnny Depp sue the Washington Post? Well, sure, but it's incredibly unlikely that he'd win. You can sue anyone for anything at any time, but there's no reason to believe that the Washington Post would have known of the falsity of the statements. And on top of that, the Washington Post simply published Amber Heard's article. The only part of the article that was written by the Washington Post was the headline, Amber Heard, I spoke up about sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath. That has to change, which more or less summarizes the things that Amber Heard actually said. So good luck proving knowledge of falsity or recklessness with respect to the truth by the Washington Post itself. Though given that the article is still online, Depp might sue for an injunction to take that article down. But by that same token, could Amber Heard sue the ACLU? The Washington Post published Heard's op-ed, but the ACLU helped her write it. Heard had promised to donate $7 million from her divorce settlement to two charities, including the ACLU, and so far, she's only paid the ACLU part of that money. Could she claim that they did a bad job of ghostwriting the op-ed? Maybe negligence? Well, again, you can sue anyone for anything at any time. Sure, this is theoretically possible, but it would be extremely complicated and probably doomed. Though more tenuous arguments have been made. Maybe Heard will use it to try and claw back some of her donation. Who knows? Complete speculation. But what about an appeal of the jury's verdict?
Esatto, questo voglio sapere. Che fastidio che da qua a qua c'è 2 chilometri, ma da qua a qua 1 metro.
Amber Heard has vowed to appeal, and even though Depp was also found to have defamed Heard, Depp was not surprisingly very pleased with the verdict. Depp said that Heard's op-ed changed his whole life in the blink of an eye, but that the jury had given his life back. Now, Heard was not pleased with the verdict and said that she was heartbroken that the mountain of evidence still was not enough to stand up to the disproportionate power influence and sway of my ex-husband. And although people talk about what precedent this verdict sets, what lawyers mean by precedent is different from how regular people often use that word. Law is set by published opinions. Legally speaking, jury verdicts don't set any precedent whatsoever. You can't cite to the Amber Heard case and hope that some other jury or judge will follow it. But if the case goes up on appeal and there is a written opinion, that opinion would have precedential effect, which is one reason potentially the parties might settle before the appeal is completed. They might just do it to get rid of uncertainty with what the Court of Appeal might or might not do.
Un po' anticlimactic questo finale, volevo vedere un po' le fiamme dell'inferno, però niente.